you guys know any better. He was in 2000.
Five o'clock. I was about to say 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock this afternoon, and welcome everyone to this planning meeting for the municipality of Meaford. We have all councillors in attendance, and with that, I will call this meeting to order. And I'll begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis people and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters. With that, I'll ask everyone to join us in a moment of reflection as we consider the business before the council. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of interest in any of the items that are before us today from council? Seeing none, knowing that if one should arise at any time during the proceedings, you may declare at that time. So welcome everyone. We're here today to learn about land use planning applications of 3 parcels in the municipality of Meaford. It's important for me to note that the Planning Act requires that persons who may later wish to file an appeal on council's decision on these matters must either provide verbal comments today at this public meeting or provide written comments to council before the decision is made. The intention of this requirement is that only those persons who have taken the time and the care to learn about the proposal and to be involved in the planning process have gained the opportunity to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Under the Planning Act, council is legally required to make decisions that conform to the county and local official plans. It is within this legal framework and our guiding policies that we are having this open public meeting to give people a chance to make formal statements about the applications before us. Your statements do not have to declare a position on the application being considered and can be focused on specific characteristics if you wish. But by making your constructive statements, you are providing the municipality with key insights into the public's perspectives. Council has a variety of legal tools available that can be applied to development to ensure that it addresses potential negative impacts and meets the adopted policies and regulations of our municipality. Those who have pre-registered for today's meetings will have an opportunity to speak remotely or in person. Given the complexity of development applications, you should expect that many of the matters raised during the meeting today will require further research and analysis to be undertaken. However, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond at the end of the meeting if they so wish. So I will now call this first public meeting to order, and this is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as 204 Union Street in Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be 20 days notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. And I note that notice of the zoning bylaw amendment was issued on June the 28th, 2022, giving that required 20 days notice. So we'll begin. I'll first ask Denise McCarl, a manager of planning services, to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date. Over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just going to provide a very brief overview of the application and summarize the comments received. The applicant's land use planner is also here to speak to the application, and you all will be familiar with Liz Buckton. And so I'll just start out with a brief description. So the purpose of the application is to rezone the lands from the development exception D-172 zone to the residential 2 exception 172 and residential 2 zones. The application relates to a consent application that will be considered separately by the Committee of Adjustment. And I just wanted to point out that in the normal process, the Committee of Adjustment would have heard this application prior to the zoning bylaw amendment being considered at a public meeting. However, in this case, there was a staff error with the circulation last month. And so the application had to be deferred at the Committee of Adjustment and recirculated. So just to avoid undue hardship on the applicant, we decided to continue with this particular zoning meeting now, knowing that no decision would be made before the Committee of Adjustment has a chance to deliberate on the application. Just to make that clear to everyone. So the proposed zoning is an anticipated condition of consent. In this particular case, the D zone is a leftover situation in that particular area of the municipality where the lands had not been serviced. And the services are now available to the front of the property. So there is an ability to change the zoning to a residential category in this case. So the zoning amendment would recognize that the lands are fronting and can connect to municipal water and sewer. They're located on an open and maintained road. And the intention is to keep the existing exception with the retained parcel. That exception provided specific regulations about a detached garage located in the rear of the yard. And then the proposed new lot would be rezoned to R2. The lands are designated urban living area in the Meaford official plan. And we've received only one comment to date on the application, and that is from the historic Saugeen Métis, noting they had no objection or opposition to the application. And Your Worship, that's all I've prepared at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So over to you then, Liz. Welcome back. Happy to have you join us again. And as the agent for this application, we welcome your comments.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And we're all set up here. That's great. So as you've noted, I'm Liz Buckton. I'm a registered professional planner, and I'm here today with a different hat on than I've worn previously, standing in front of this particular council, but certainly happy to be here and speak to this file. I have been working with Mr. Lamb in preparing this application over the past number of months. They are looking to sever the existing lot at 204 Union Street into 2 halves, one half with the existing house and outbuilding, and the other half vacant, with the intention that a new dwelling will be built on the property, and that new dwelling would be connected to full water and sewer services. As Denise mentioned, the properties are currently partially serviced right now, and that is fairly common in this area as sewer has only recently been extended up Union Street. And so the intention there is that the existing septic system servicing the retained dwelling would be discontinued, and that lot also would connect into the municipal services so that both parcels would be eligible for that more urban residential zoning. From a policy standpoint, I think I'll just summarize that it does conform to the official plans, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and upholds good planning. We are kind of hitting that density target for those areas that's outlined within the official plan, looking at that broader area. Certainly incorporating the Gates of Kent development, we would exceed that 20 units per net hectare on that original land holding. And I think there would also be the potential, based on your zoning bylaw, for ancillary units to be established at some point in the future on the lands if a landowner so desired, and in accordance with your regulations. So I think at this point, I'll essentially just say that I'm here if there are questions from the council table or from the public that I can speak to. I feel that this application should be supported for the zoning amendment and likewise for the consent. And I will attend that meeting next week with the Committee of Adjustment to make a similar statement to that group as well. But certainly happy to address any questions from you at this time.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate your comments. We don't have any pre-registrations to speak at this time. And we do have a lot of public here, and I don't know what your interest is in any of these three. So I will ask if there is anyone from the audience who wishes to speak on this file. I'm not seeing anyone, so I will turn to council then and ask if there's anyone on council who wishes to speak on this file. Not seeing anyone here either. Fairly straightforward here. Are there any other points that you wish to bring forward, Denise?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
And then we'll be back to you, Liz. Anything further from you? All right, well, at that time, sorry, yes, there is. All right. For those of you, if anyone is leaving us at this point, I just want to thank those who came to participate in this particular file. And this matter will now, as you've heard, go back to Development Services and to another committee for follow-up on any additional information that is required. Once staff is satisfied that they have all of the necessary information to provide a recommendation to council on this application, a detailed planning report will be brought back to council to assist us in making a decision. This report will evaluate how this proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and municipal policies that must be considered as part of council's decision. And it'll explore the various public and agency comments received regarding the application, noting those tools which may be applied in order to address any concerns that may arise. Just want to mention too, to anyone listening and tuned in, if you would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division at planning@meaford.ca. And with that, we'll close that meeting and open the second meeting. This is the second public meeting. It is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as 143610 Side Road 15 in the former township of Sydenham. Again, this meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. And I do know that June the 28th was the required time, and that was completed for 20 days notice. So again, I'll turn over to our Manager of Planning Services, Denise McCarl, for a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public comments that we've received to date. Over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this application is requesting permission for a larger home industry use than is currently permitted. So the applicant is proposing to use a detached accessory building at the rear of their property for a custom workshop. And that workshop would be a new location for the countertops plus that operation that's currently a couple of doors down from this location. But the current zoning of the lands RR, rural residential, permits a custom workshop, but limits the size to no greater than 25% of the dwelling unit. And in this case, that would be 85 square meters, and doesn't allow direct retail sales. So the proposal is to allow those, the retail sales, some small retail sales to happen, not a big store, but a retail component, and allow the business to be up to 293 square meters. The rezoning would add exception to the RR zone to permit the use. The lands are designated rural in the Meaford official plan, and it's potentially a related site plan application could be required. So we have received a couple of comments from agencies. The first one is from the Historic Saugeen Métis with no objections or oppositions. And the second one is from the County of Grey. The County OP I'll summarize our comments. County OP designates the subject property as rural, and new on-farm diversified uses shall be limited in size and scale as per table 8 of the official plan, and as long as those uses can be sustained by local service and infrastructure levels. The applicant's proposing an on-farm diversified use approximately 293 square meters on a lot which is 0.82 hectares in size. The county OP would permit an on-farm diversified use of up to 164 square meters on the subject property. So county planning staff recommend the applicant reduce the size of the workshop to meet this size requirement, and they would have no further concerns should they reduce the size to the 164 square meters. They also might mention some other information and size criteria. So staff, we recently received these comments, and we will be reviewing those comments further with the applicant. But the applicant is here also to speak to the application today. And that's all I have prepared at this time, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. And at this point, I will invite Holly Stewart, who is an agent for the application, to come forward and give us her comments.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to address the fact that we didn't have a letter to go with our application from a professional planner. We did try many planners. They were all busy, very busy, which everyone is. So it was going to be a 3 to 6 month wait to find someone. And because we have the conditional offer to purchase this business, we didn't have the luxury of waiting that long. So we decided to proceed on our own. And we just wanted to thank Denise for processing the application in a timely fashion. Basically, I just want to address the issue that the county has recommended reducing the size of the workshop. The current owner of this business, his shop currently is 334 square meters. And we're proposing 293, which is already smaller. We wanted to go smaller because, of course, the cost would be less for building it. But the current owner advised that he wouldn't go any smaller because the material is very large. Some pieces are 14 feet in length, and you need a forklift to handle the material safely. So we really need to stick with the 293 meter size, which again is considerably smaller than the current owner, which is 2 doors to the east. I think that's all I have to say, unless you have any questions.
Okay, we have no registered speakers to speak in person on this meeting, and I again would ask anyone in the audience if they have anything to add to this, to speak to this file. And I'm not seeing any, so I'll go back to Council, and Councillor Bartley, you're up first, and Councillor Vickers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Denise, I visited the site. I visited the site of the former business many times. I bought many countertops from them. And I visited the new property. If they decide that they need the 293 square meters, is this something that's taboo, can never happen? Or is there a process to go back to the official plan of Grey County?
So your worship, through you, without coming up with any definitive opinion on it, I would say that is possible, but I would like to work with the county more on what, how they measured the size, and if there's anything that they see other than an official plan amendment, there may be a possibility for further discussions.
Go ahead.
Part 2, would this be able to be done in a tight time frame, or is this going to take a year?
Your worship, that's an excellent question. I can't answer that. So it would depend on the process that comes out of our discussions. And certainly it's never our intention to make things draw out like that, but it would be something that I couldn't really answer until I understand better if there is a way for us to resolve this, if there's, even a way that there could be, if they could get started on a smaller, in a smaller building and maybe expand later, or if there's some other option. I wouldn't want to say what those options are yet, but we will discuss further with the county.
Thank you.
And Councillor Vickers?
Thank you, Your Worship. So my question is, if you go by the numbers from what I see here and on the report, 25% of the dwellings. So my rough math has put it to about 1,000 square foot house that is on the property. Would that be close to being accurate?
No, it's about a 2,400 square foot home.
So if you take 25% of 2,400, that's 600 square feet. And the math puts it back to the 85 square meters.
So through you, Your Worship, so the 25% requirement is the current permission. So what you're allowed to have now, you're allowed to have a custom workshop of up to 25% of your dwelling size without asking for any planning permission.
Correct. So, but what I'm trying to figure out is how big the house is. So, but the house you said is about 2,400 square feet.
Yes.
It does seem odd that if you had a bigger house, you could have a bigger shop. It sometimes doesn't always seem to make sense. And would that be a fair assessment, Denise? That if you do have a bigger house, you could have a huge house, then you could have a bigger shop. It doesn't seem to really make sense.
Looks like the CAO would like to answer that, Your Worship.
Over to you, Rob.
The intent of this provision is that you can have a use that's accessory to the dwelling. So how do you do that in a general terms? And municipalities all across the province establish the as of right home industry or home occupation as a percentage of the dwelling. So it's quite common for us. And it's to maintain that principle of the house is the main feature and the other is the accessory feature. If you want to create a bigger, then you're into a commercial or an industrial type use. And that's the rationale for that 25% as a general requirement to maintain it as of right.
So really it's more about massing than anything else.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking about introducing a non-residential use onto a residential property, and it really comes down to impact of potential neighbors as well. A 25% of the house generally is fairly small and is going to be of minimum impact. And then if you go bigger than that, you want to have some sort of assessment of impact, and thus it would come through an amendment with council, and neighbors would be notified, and council would hear about impacts through that process. So that's the intent of that baseline number.
Thanks for that, Rob. And Councillor Greenfield, and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your presentation. I'm going to be very optimistic about this. I think with a bit of negotiation, this square footage can be resolved. Certainly the province and the county and our municipality are very much in favor of economic development, and I see this as a good example. I do have a couple of questions for Ms. McCarl. And this is, again, assuming this is going to go. Are we looking at a required number of parking spaces? And I'm wondering about waste materials. Is this just items that can go in a bin, or are we that far along yet to comment on that?
So, Your Worship, the applicant at this point hasn't proposed any specific parking space requirement, like they haven't asked for any relief or anything like that. But we would determine likely through site plan control where the parking would be and the parking needs. I imagine this isn't a replication of the Van Dolder's Kitchen Bath Store where you would have a lot of people, and looking at the remote location, I think everyone's pretty familiar with it. We certainly don't expect it to have that huge parking need that it would in a store. And certainly they have an example of the other location that they're planning to purchase to know what the impacts are in terms of parking. In terms of waste materials, that I would imagine any waste material would have to be dealt with the same as any waste material ever would, which would be that it would have to be disposed of appropriately and not on the site. But it's possible that the applicant might be able to speak to what they intend or what normally happens in the existing location now. So I would defer to them.
Thank you, Denise. Is that?
That's fine.
That's fine. Okay, and over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do as well hope that all of the county and municipal staff can work together and make this happen, because as Councillor Greenfield has said, we love to see an expansion of a new business coming into Meaford. The parking was my question, but just additionally to that, I'll ask while I have the mic about signage. Is there an intention for a sign? I assume that there is. And what might the restrictions be in terms of placement and size for signage for a business of this nature?
So, Your Worship, I would assume that there is going to be a sign to identify the property, because some people do attend the site. I actually don't remember the actual regulations for signage in the sign bylaw off by heart, but they would have to apply for a sign permit.
Thank you.
And Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would think from visiting the previous location and looking at the equipment and how things were produced on that floor space, I don't think that you could produce your product on half the footprint of the old location. I think that would be more than the word tight. I don't think you could even do it. So I do wish you well on your request. As it is noted, slightly less than what your old location was, but you've got to have that floor space or you just can't do your work. And I've seen the saws and I've seen the tables. So I wish you well on that application moving into Grey County.
Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, just a quick question. Did I hear correctly that there was another workshop that was larger? And my question is just, was that on the basis of the 25% of the dwelling on the property involved?
So through you, Your Worship, so there's a Countertops Plus location that this applicant is seeking to purchase, and that location is a couple of doors away from this property. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 properties over to the east, I think. They could probably answer that. Holly could probably speak to that specifically, or maybe someone else has visited the site. But I can't speak to how that one got approved or what rules it fell under. I don't know if Mr. Armstrong remembers that one or if it was before our times. So I can't really say. It likely had a different regulation that it fell under, but it was given a site-specific exception to operate. So the existing Countertops Plus has a site-specific zoning exception to operate. A couple of doors away from this property, if that explains what you were looking for.
Well, it just raises more questions in my mind. I can't imagine why, if we're going to enforce the rule, why there's an exception in existence that nobody knows how it came about. But anyway.
So just, Your Worship, just to clarify, I'm sure we can look at what the program was at the time when that one was approved, but it didn't really seem particularly relevant when I was reviewing this case because it's under the current rules. But I was aware that the current Countertops Plus property has a site-specific exception, and it's my understanding it sought that exception to allow that business to develop on that property. So when we received this application for the new site, I was looking at it based on, and we circulated it based on the rules of today, which meant that they needed to seek a new site-specific exception. And then, of course, they're under the current official plans, both the county and the municipality.
Okay. Rob, did you have something to add to that?
No, I think Denise answered it.
Answered it
Yeah.
well. Certainly did. Well, with that, unless there's further questions, I will ask Ms. Stewart if you have anything to add at this point, an answer perhaps to the question about waste removal.
Hello, thank you for being here today. It's a very important decision. So currently, Bill is using a small Miller bin to get rid of the waste, and it comes on a weekly basis to get rid of the waste. I believe, if I can say that in 2015, Bill expanded his building from 1,400, and he did an add-on of 2,300 square feet to the total of 3,700 square feet. And I'm looking to build a slightly smaller. Is there any other questions?
First off, could you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, my name is Evan Stewart.
Thank you, Evan. Okay. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
And there's no further comments, Ms. Stewart, from you? Okay. With that, again, thank you everyone for attending this, and I have to repeat the statements that I've made before. This matter will now be referred back to Development Services to follow up, not only with the questions that have been asked here today, but to follow up on any additional information that we have heard from. Once staff are satisfied that they have all of the necessary information to provide this recommendation on this application, they will provide us with a detailed planning report to assist us in our decision making. Again, this report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and in this case, particularly the county policy that must be considered as part of our decision. And it will also explore the various public and agency comments received in addition regarding the application. I have mentioned before, and I'll mention again, that if anyone tuning in wishes to receive notice of a future decision on this file, please provide contact information to the planning services by email at planning@meaford.ca. So with that, we'll move on to the third meeting, the opening of public meeting 12-34 Collingwood Street East, Z06, and this is 2022. So a zoning bylaw amendment for this property known as 1234 Collingwood Street East in the former township of Meaford. A public meeting has already occurred on this site. However, the proposal has been amended and the municipality is seeking public input with a second public meeting on the updated proposal. It is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. And based on those rules, again, there must be at least 20 days notice. And I note that the notice of this zoning bylaw amendment was issued on June the 28th, given the required 20 days notice. So first, Rob, I guess this is your file to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date. So over to our CAO, Rob Armstrong, to speak first.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. The first thing I'll do is clarify why I am the lead on this file. I think it's very important to the public to be transparent in that the part of the applicant on this file is our the family is our development services director, Rob Voigt. We were completely aware of that when we retained Rob, and to ensure no conflict, I agreed that I would put my planner's hat back on and take on this file as the lead, or sorry, take on this file as the lead, and we'll be managing it throughout the process for that purpose. In addition, you've heard it's the second public meeting. We did have a public meeting quite a few years ago with regard to this proposal, or to a proposal on these lands that will be included in their presentation It sort of got to a point where we're negotiating the community benefit requirement under our official plan, and then the ownership fell through at that point in time, and the applicant did not carry on. Since that time, the current owner, Sarli, have picked up the property and demolished the buildings which were approved previously with the former owner, and are now wanting to proceed. I won't get into the details of the application. Basically, they're looking for exceptions to the C1 zone to facilitate their proposal, which their planning consultant will take you through some of the highlights of those changes. With regard to comments received, those comments received as part of the first public meeting are still on the record. We did receive a number of comments from conservation and different parties, so they're still on the record. With regard to this new public meeting, we have not received any formal comments. We did receive a comment from the County of Grey today, said that they would have comments to us later this week. And that's all we've received to date.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And I understand the applicant is available and attending here today. Krista Voigt is present. There you are. I'll ask you if you wish to come forward and give us any further details.
If I may, Your Worship, I'm going to sub in for Krista, if that's okay. My name is Chris Menzies. I'm her planner.
Okay.
So, and I apologize for everybody who I have my back to, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Once again, my name is Chris Menzies. I'm a planner, and I'm a partner at a firm called MHBC Planning, and I am one of the partners who runs our office in Barrie. I'm here today with Lloyd Hunt of Lloyd Hunt Architects, and I'm going to be doing your worship and members of council presentation, but Lloyd is here to discuss any questions that you may have with respect to the design. And as you may be aware, Lloyd did a presentation in front of your Heritage Committee, and he did a much more eloquent job at describing this design than I will be able to do, but I'll try and do my best. Also, your worship, members of council, we have Crozier and Associates, civil engineers and transportation engineers available by phone. Should you have any questions of a detailed civil or transportation nature that I am not in a position to field. So those are my preliminary comments. And as yourself, your worship, and Mr. Armstrong have identified, there is a new ownership group on this property, and they have a new vision for this property. So it is somewhat different than the members of the public who may have seen the last proposal. They're bringing something different to the site. So as you have identified, the property is 12 to 34 Collingwood Street, and I'm going to make an assumption that this little device does something for me. So I will see if this works. Fantastic. So the site is located on Collingwood Street. It is an amalgamation of several parcels of land, and it is, we open the curtains, we could probably look across the parking lot and see the property ourselves. So we had an opportunity to take a drone shot, or maybe it was taken from the roof of this building. But as Mr. Armstrong has identified, the previous applicant received a demolition permit for the buildings that were there. The buildings have been removed. A couple of the reasons why I wanted to show you this shot, I'm sure everybody here is much more familiar with the property than I am, is that in some ways it shows an elevation change on the property, not just like the building we're in today, whereas the frontage closer to Sykes Street is taller than the frontage at the back of the site, which is closer to the dental office. One of the other reasons why I wanted to show this shot is McCarroll Park is behind part of the property, which will play into a bit of the presentation and some of the thinking of the design of the property. So I wanted to provide to the public some of the background material that has gone into the thought process associated with this, and some of the documents that the planning department and others will be looking at. So as part of the complete application, we've done a planning justification report, the heritage impact statement. And once again, we had an opportunity to go to Heritage Committee and describe the proposal to them several weeks ago. A functional servicing report was done, and for members of the public, that looks at sewer and water and capabilities. And I can tell you that there is sufficient sewer, water, stormwater available at the newly constructed Collingwood Street to facilitate this development, so there's no upgrades needed. There was a geotechnical investigation which determined soil types and stability. There was a stormwater management report identifying how stormwater is going to be undertaken. There was a traffic impact study, which looked at not only the entrances to the site, ensuring that they're safe and function appropriately, but how the circulation on the site itself will work, and all of those are supportive of the development. We have also done various updates to those reports based on the new proposal. And we've done a phase 2 environmental site audit, which determines whether or not there's any contamination on the property. There's been a concept plan, which I'll show you in a moment, and some building elevations done. So if I may, just to orient everybody, the bottom of this drawing is Collingwood Street, and the proposal is for 3 buildings. Those of you who saw the first public meeting were aware that there was one longer building, which was along the entire frontage of Collingwood Street. The new owners thought that reducing the bulk of the building was appropriate for this site, so they're proposing 3 buildings. The yellow building on the left, which is the closest one to Sykes Street, is what I'm going to call a traditional mixed-use building with commercial units on the front, fronting onto Collingwood Street, and 3 stories of residential above. There's 10 one-story residential units of approximately 600 square feet, and then there's 10 2-bedroom units of approximately 1,200 square feet, which are actually 2 floors in size. And there will be parking at the back. The 2 buildings on the right, the purple one, and I'm going to use the term pink one if my eyesight is not failing me. And those are effectively 6 townhouse units, and they flank, the planning term is flank onto Collingwood Street. Those 6 townhouse units are sitting at this point, based on preliminary design, around 2,400 to 3,000 square feet. But they're somewhat unique. And I'm going to say that because the center gray area with the 3 oval landscape pieces you see, and you're going to hear me talk a little bit more about that. There's a pedestrian mews or pedestrian walkway in between those townhouse units. And the nature and extent of that is those townhouse units will also have commercial development at the ground floor. So if you are coming off Collingwood Street as a pedestrian, you can walk down the mews, patron the commercial units on either side, and at the end of the mews, there is an intent to have direct pedestrian access to McCarroll Park. And the intent is to align that access with the plans that the municipality has to improve and or redesign McCarroll Park. The gray areas are obviously asphalted or parking. On the far right near the dental office, there's a laneway or driveway. So the townhouse owners would drive down that driveway and turn left into their buildings into 2-car parking garages. In between the yellow building and the purple building is not only the entrance to the traditional yellow condominium building, but it's a dual entrance, once again, for people to drive in, turn right into the purple buildings. So they will drive into their own garages. These are some conceived elevations. And once again, Mr. Hunt is the architect, and he described this very well, in my opinion, to the historical committee. But one of the things that I'm going to suggest to you is seminally different from the proposal you saw before is Mr. Hunt was very context sensitive, not only from a built form and a bulk perspective, but in trying to, I'm not going to use the word mirror because that's not appropriate, but trying to emulate a lot of the built form that you see on Sykes Street. So these building elevations read like separate units, like on Sykes Street. There is some undulation on them, which you can't see because this is a flat elevation, once again, to mirror Sykes Street, and to put some of the upper floors actually within the roof line to reduce the bulk. So to set the stage, if you look at the top set of elevations, the elevation, this is the condo apartment. The elevation on the right is what you would see if you're on Collingwood Street. So each of this condo building reads like separate units, once again, like you see in a historic downtown, not dissimilar to what you have on Sykes Street. The elevation on the left is what would be seen from the parking lot. The 2 buildings below are the 2 townhouse buildings, with the one on the right being the one closest to the dental office, and the one on the left is the middle purple building. And the elevation you're looking at would be if you're walking down the pedestrian mews. If you look right, you'd see the building on the right. If you look left, you'd see the building on the left. These two townhouse buildings read slightly differently in height. So the condo building is sitting around 12.8 meters. The townhouse on the right is sitting just over 12 meters. But the townhouse on the left is sitting at just over 15 meters, which is not dissimilar to the height of this building at the back. And the reason why that is like this building, there's an elevation change. So this is how the elevation works. So if you look at the top elevation, that is a side view of the two townhouse blocks. The building on the right being closer to the dental office, the building on the left would be the building that's in the middle. And as you can see, that's where we're planning to pick up the grade, effectively where the grade is today. So the townhouse building on the left through the Mews reads a little higher, notwithstanding the fact that it's really actually a 3-story building. And based on how your definition of height works, we're looking at just over 15 meters for that building. This is a site model. It's not a true representation of the elevations, but you can see once again how the grade is being picked up in the middle of the site. And how the built form works on the site as a whole. So I'm going to suggest to you that Mr. Hunt was very conscientious of not having a slab building across the front of the site, to have a little bit of a different approach that was more context sensitive, and to invite the public into the site. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes on all the planning stuff, because that's what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm standing up here. So from a provincial policy statement for the benefit of the public, planners are to review applications that they're representing, and as it relates to the provincial policy statement, determine whether or not that the proposal is consistent. So I will suggest to you that this proposal is. Provincial policy statement, especially in areas of downtown and full services, look to see mixed use development. They want to see compact built form, use of existing or planned infrastructure, and promote a range of mix of housing types, which I'm going to suggest to you that my clients have done. This proposal, in my mind, is truly one of those things that, once again, maybe a personal bias, that good downtowns look to seek. Ground floor commercial that's functional, pedestrian orientation, and upper units that host residential. So you can have more people living in your downtown that can patron a lot of these businesses that are here or are being proposed. Similarly, the county has various policies. One of the main drivers that they have is to promote development that is within a primary settlement area. Meaford enjoys that, the urban area of Meaford and primary settlement area, and this proposal would conform to those official plan policies. Similarly, Meaford official plan, the site is in pink and it's outlined in yellow. So it's in the downtown core commercial, which once again looks at higher order residential uses. So residential uses like single detached and so forth are discouraged, but residential uses like we're proposing are encouraged. And in my opinion, this proposal conforms to the official plan. So once again, as Mr. Armstrong has identified, we are currently in the right zone, downtown C1 commercial zone, but we're asking for various zone exceptions. And I'd like to characterize those zone exceptions in almost like a suite of exceptions. And I'm going to show you a list of them in a moment. But effectively, your downtown commercial zone operates like, in my opinion, many small Ontario downtown zones. And it contemplates development on individual lots. This is a condominium proposal. So a lot of the things that you're going to see that I'll show you related to the exceptions that are being asked for relate to this being a condo proposal as opposed to a freehold proposal. The built form really wouldn't be any different, but we need to make sure we sculpture the zoning bylaw to make sure that what they're proposing, if council sees fit to approve the bylaw, in fact, can accurately and appropriately be put on the site. So first of all, we're asking for some additional permitted uses. One is a multiple unit dwelling. So the way your bylaw works, we can have townhouses. From a layperson's perspective, we are proposing townhouses, but townhouses are things that are required on individual lots on a public street. It doesn't mean that condos are inappropriate. In fact, they are appropriate. But your bylaw basically says if you're doing a townhouse in downtown Meaford, it should be on a public street and should be freehold. So we're asking that multiple unit dwellings, which can be an apartment, it can be a townhouse, it could be many things, but single detached becomes one of the permitted uses. We're also asking that commercial be allowed in a multiple unit dwelling. One of the things that my clients want to do is actually, the term I'm going to use, your worship and members of council, is push the agenda of having commercial on this site. They're not proposing a residential development in downtown Meaford. They're proposing a commercial development with residential above. And that's important to the approach and what they believe is appropriate for the downtown. From what we call a zone provision perspective, a lot of these suites of things that are listed here really relate to having multiple units on one lot. As we identified at the beginning of the presentation, this is multiple lots. So often when we work in small downtowns and we're having larger buildings on multiple lots, we do a thing that's called, let's assume all the lots are merged for the purposes of zoning. So normally on a lot, you have to have setbacks from either side of the lot. Because of the way this proposal is being brought forward, which I will suggest to you is appropriate planning, good urban design, meets the policies, we have to tinker with some of the bylaw requirements, and those are listed there. The more, what I'll call substantive ones, is your bylaw right now contemplates 3-story buildings at around 13 meters in height. We're asking for a 5-story building and 15 meters of height, once again, partly because of the anomaly of the grade change. If it was a flat site, we may or may not be in front of you. Similarly, we're asking for site-specific changes to require commercial in these buildings, so you don't end up at the end of the day with a bunch of residential buildings. It's commercial development with residential above. Lastly, we are asking for a provision for bonusing, and part of that is to grant the municipality an easement through that pedestrian mews, so the public has full and unfettered access through that mews, so they can access through the condominium to get to McCarroll Park. Because there was very specifically a desire to have connectivity between Collingwood Street and McCarroll Park through this site. And your worship, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, I am quite happy to answer any questions. Once again, Crozier and Associates on the phone for all things engineering, and Mr. Hunt can explain more of his design in detail if you're desirous to hear some details. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Menzies. Certainly very thorough, understandable presentation. Appreciate that.
Planners get paid by the word, your worship.
I hope your client knows that. At this stage, we do have Rebecca Alexander and Madeline Ferguson, who are civil and transportation engineers, and they are attending virtually. And I will ask if they wish to speak, and we'd like to hear what they have to say with regard to transportation issues.
I apologize. I think my headset was muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I apologize, Your Worship. My name's Maddie Ferguson. I'm a transportation engineer at Crozier and Associates. Beyond what Chris very eloquently described, I don't have too much to add. The main transportation entrances are off of Collingwood Street. The central one shown on the screen provides access to the rear of the apartment building, and then access to the townhouses that are in that central building. And then the eastern driveway on the right of the page provides access to those last row of townhouses. Primarily, the transportation impact study assessed trips out to Syke Street, just given the higher order nature of that road. From the commercial perspective, it's expected that many people are going to be walking already downtown in the area and coming through that commercial mews, as Chris described. Other than that, I don't really have too much to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. We'll just put you on hold, and then you can listen in if you will, and because we do have 3 registrations of people who wish to speak or ask questions. So we'll bring them on board now. And Jim Sullivan, you are up first. Welcome you to join us.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Jim Sullivan, and although I'm a member of the Heritage Committee, I'm here on my own behalf. I'm also excited. I'm really excited. I would like to give you a hug, Mr. Hug. And maybe Mr. Armstrong could pass your cards across to a developer who's got some property on our waterfront. Thank you for your presentation, Sarley, Canada. I was with the Heritage Committee for the previous Collingwood Street proposal, and there was a number of issues with it, including its mass, the parking, and the grade at the McCarroll Park property line. Sarley's design is innovative. It uses the slope to develop separate, unique settings, lessening the impact of the height and the density of the proposal. You've shown that density can be increased and still work with the Heritage Conservation District plan. It's a plan with vision. Thank you. You have succeeded in creating a development, not just for the prospective buyers, but for the public as well. The Muse is a terrific setting, and its proximity to Sykes Street and the waterfront. You've incorporated garages with parking that is in the rear and not easily visible from the street. And the provision for public access to McCarroll Park is a wonderful idea. And I hope that our Meaford staff can work with you on this. This proposal fits most of the ideals of the Heritage Conservation District plan, and the final exterior materials, design, and site plan are also directed by the Heritage Conservation District plan. That the proponent must apply for a heritage permit through the Heritage Committee, which will be making recommendations to council on whether to approve it. I am excited. That's all I can say. Thank you. It's the second thing to come along within a month or so. We had another proposal for a boutique hotel on Sykes Street in the Stedman's building. The more things that happen like this, the more Meaford's going to appreciate it, the better the downtown area is going to be. Our Sykes Street stores are going to do better, the restaurants are going to do better. Thank you.
Economic development and progress. Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate your comments. And Reed Barrett, have you listed here? Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for this opportunity. My name's Reed Barrett. I'm a permanent resident of the municipality. And I'm always encouraged when I see new development, and I get excited like Jim does, particularly in the urban part of Meaford. I've had a chance to review the documents, and regarding this development, there are many, many positive aspects of it to bring growth and prosperity to the core of Meaford. It would be, we all know that that would be a welcome addition to this community. I also want to applaud both Sarley Canada and the municipality for bringing this to the historic group. First, it's early days to sort of do the presentation. I think what we've seen today will probably spur a few more questions. And I think it's all good as we kind of go down this planning path. As I reviewed it, I saw 3 points that I thought were worthy of consideration and discussion and possibly clarification. As we consider adding residential condo units, we also need to consider the streetscape of what our downtown looks like and the prominence they play. Commercial enterprises generally benefit the closer to Sykes Street, and residential benefit closer to the Harbor and Bayfield Street. The brief describes this development as being across the street from the parking lot for the hardware store and parking for Meaford Hall, when in reality, it really frames our current and future town square. And so this development is key to how our downtown looks And I'm really happy to hear that it's going to look similar to the individual units along Slate Street. Facing onto Collingwood Street should present an opportunity for foot traffic to cross the street and see the boutiques and the shops and want to visit that side of the street and have some economic benefit to the stores there. When I looked at the one, not this picture, but the one side viewpoint, it looked like, two massive walls of building with a very narrow pathway into the Mews. And perhaps it's not like that, but I wondered if there was thought given to how it would project across the street to foot traffic to see the stores that are in there and want to cross the street, visit those boutiques, and eventually maybe cut through to the park. I offer these considerations and thoughts just in trying to reach our full potential as a community and really set the tone for future investment, because we know investment follows investment. And I think this is a good one. So thank you.
Thank you, Reid. And we also have Linda Thompson registered, but we're not sure she can join us virtually. Do we have her with us, Derek? No, we don't. Okay. So we have a number of people in the audience who perhaps have not registered, and I will offer the same opportunity if anyone wishes to speak on this file. Now's the chance. Welcome. Please come forward and let us know who you are.
Sure. My name is Alan Reed. I'm a resident of Meaford. I live up the street from Collingwood. I too am really pleased to see this as a substitute for the previous proposal, which doesn't require words. I think it's great. Hats off, all that excitement. Yeah. But a question, why does it have to be 4 and 5 stories? And if it's going to go 4 and 5 stories, what are the explicit benefits that the community will receive in compliance with the official plan? And I'm making an assumption, and Rob can answer it, that I assume that this will be guided by the plan today, not the plan of tomorrow. Correct, Rob?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question really is, what are the benefits that we get out of allowing this to break the current rules? Because other developments will follow suit. And maybe they just need an example of what the benefits are so we can find out what we get out of it. Is that fair?
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this point?
I spoke at the original meeting for the old plan about 3 or 4 years ago. I live on Collingwood Street at the bottom end. In one way, I'm really impressed with this. It wasn't hard from the original one we saw, which took no neighbors into account. I do like the building. I like the townhouse thing. It's really unique. We never thought of that on our street at that point. There's a lot of commercial involved in this, and I know a lot of people think it's going to bring things up. I was born and raised in Guelph, which has a lot of that on the ground floor. I lived in Elora for 30 years, not just outside. The only thing I worried about is there's a lot of commercial activity under these buildings. And I've noticed in Guelph, which has a lot, Elora, which is a lot of tourists there, Sundays especially, they basically have to close the downtown. Which hurt a lot of the businesses outside of this area because the people just wouldn't go anymore. They closed the downtown to parking so all these people could go into these new Mews type buildings. And what happened is all the outskirt buildings they never went to. They complained, and then this year they've had to open the street. Just a thought of that as far as that. With all that commercial underneath these buildings. Another problem we have a little more than they do down there is, let's face it, when Thanksgiving's over until spring, we don't get a lot of tourists. Like, we just don't. I know my street is like a wasteland, just down the street from this. Again, I'm encouraged by the look of the residential that's going in there. It's really needed and it looks great. As far as the traffic in the summer, hopefully we would think of either a light at the top of the street and definitely something at the bottom where you take your life into your hand into that road at the harbor. They're coming around there at full speed, whether it be speed bumps or 3 stop signs, I don't know what, but that's something that would need to be taken care of. It's fine to say that we're going to have just people walking everywhere, but as we've noticed from war in Europe, it's not going to, we're still going to have a lot of traffic. It's just the way it is. We need people to come here for our tourism. I'm really impressed that down when we did the harbor there, we now have a lot more people coming in. It's nice down there, see a lot of visitors, see a lot of cars from the Toronto area, which is nice. They come up here and bring money into our community. I think they're pretty good there. One other thing was, if we're going to have people in there and they're going to, we want them to come to our town, where are we going to put their vehicles? Because they have to get here. I just don't know if there's enough there. Right now I see we've been doing a lot more and making more parking, like behind the main street, etc. But if we want these people to come in, we're going to have to transport them in here, and then then we have to promote them once they're here. One question, I don't know about the parking lot behind the building, or I don't know if anyone can help me. Is there more? Like the parking is quite small for people who live there, and is there more for handicap, etc.?
Check. If you'll wait just a few minutes, we'll go, there may be more questions for you.
I just wonder, we've been studying this the last few weeks, and I think that's all I have to say. I think it's a great project, but I think there's things that we have to think about, other than just the fact that it's gonna look nice and we're gonna have good commercial in there. I'm really happy that people, want to do it, but we just have a few things we got to take care of, I think. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, John. As always, we appreciate positive comments coming forward and things to think about. Always helps in the final analysis. Don't see any further hands.
Hi, my name is Liz Harris, and I also am part of the Heritage group with Jim. I was away when this presentation was made the last time. I'm sorry, because I would have asked a lot more questions. I love the idea. I think you're coming in the right direction. I think the 5 stories really needs to be questioned. I think our official plan says 3. And I think we need to really watch what we're doing, because if we approve this, this will set a precedent going down the road. And I don't think we want 5 stories. I like the idea, and I'm assuming across the front that green space is going to be trees, something enticing to block out the look of the buildings, and not that they're not going to look nice, but we need to incorporate more green space and more trees to accent our downtown and the heritage part of our downtown. I like the idea that you're looking at allowing the public to walk through to access our park, McCarroll Park, and also the close proximity to the harbor. I know this is really early stages, so I know we'll be seeing you again, especially at Heritage, but we want to maintain that heritage feeling with the buildings, and I'm sure that when the plans come out that we'll see some wonderful touches with heritage in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Council, we'll open it up to you for comments, questions. Anyone wish to start off? We'll start off with Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And when the proponent gets an opportunity to do some final comments, there wasn't much discussion on the number of parking spaces. I think I read it was supposed to be like 1.5 and you're asking for 1. So just when you get your opportunity there to have a little explanation on the residents that are going to be in here, but the reduced parking.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question and a statement. The question is, because the old plan a couple of years ago was so much different than this, why would the comments be relevant in this? I don't understand that. They should be squashed and redone to the new plan.
Your worship, some of the comments like from the Conservation Authority talking about stormwater management, they're applicable with any redevelopment of this property. So I'm not saying all are completely relevant, but some like those will be relevant. And if we don't receive any further comments from the Conservation Authority, we didn't receive any in relation to the second public meeting, we'll still consider those requirements they identified in the first process. So that's what I meant by that.
Thank you. And my statement being, a lot of the times we come to these meetings with something like this on the table and the negativity in the room is awful. And it really gladdens my heart, and I feel really good about the positivity that come out of this. And it makes a meeting go really well. And it doesn't happen often in this room. So thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for the presentation. A comment, first of all, I'm a bit disappointed with the lack of green space. I realize you've only got so many square footage on this property, and you've got two large buildings, and you need entranceways, and you need parking, and so on and so forth. But if there's any way a little more greening can be done, I think that would be wonderful. My question is concerning the access to McCarroll Park. I think that's a great idea. I'm just hoping, and I'm trying to visualize the altitudes and the slope here. I'm hoping this access, both up and down, can be handicap accessible, because our folks in our area who are physically challenged, I'm sure would love to explore the new development and get down and up from McCarroll. And the only other thing, and this is okay, this is really outside the envelope. I have to be careful how I say this. We have had discussions concerning a recent development proposal that commemorated the business that was located on a former property. And I may be the only one here who would remember this, but this site was for many years home to a business that was very, very important. Not maybe necessarily to our downtown, but certainly to our community. And that was the Meaford Co-op. I'd really like to see someplace, some acknowledgement to the fact that that business was there, and just a tiny remembrance of the importance that it played in our community. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think the theme today, as we're hearing about this project, is exciting, and it is wonderful, as Councillor Bartley mentioned, to hear that and to feel that energy in the room. So I think we're all really looking forward to this project going forward. It's been mentioned, but thinking of the commercial spaces and recognizing that Meaford has the tourism designation and that we are traditionally seasonal with our commercial areas, I see this as really having the potential to change that. We know what it's like in Thornbury on a Sunday afternoon, and I see this muse being the draw that will bring people that extra 10 minutes to come and explore Meaford. So I think it's absolutely wonderful. A couple of questions, though. It is noted a request to amend the bylaw to allow reduced parking requirement from 1.5 to 1. So I'm wondering if we need to be concerned that any of that overflow would need to utilize our market square, and should, our market square at some point, as again was mentioned, take another direction, then where would that parking overflow go? And my other question was in relation to the condos, and I recognize it is early in the planning, but do we know at this point if they're meant to be leased or owned condos? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I just really want to thank Reid Barrett and Jim Sullivan for their comments today. I think we've heard today that heritage values commercial development. I keep hearing on the street that, you people on the Heritage Committee, you're just trying to shut everything down. No, we're so enthusiastic about growing our business district, and this is a plan that brings that right to the fore. And I really want to just echo what Shirley just said, and that is Reid's comment that the market square is the market square. It's not a parking lot. And it had an illustrious past in this community, and it has an illustrious future that we have to plan for. It should be green. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Yep, through your worship. Thank you for the presentation. It is certainly somewhat different than what I've ever seen before proposed here in Meaford. So I got about 3 or 4 questions here, if the worship will allow. The first question is fairly simple. What is the total area of the development? The second question is, you talked about contamination. Has there been any contamination been found on any of the properties? And if so, any idea what kind of contamination is there? The parking, from what I've done a count on, I've counted 54 parking spots, and I don't quite understand where the 1-to-1 is coming from. So I guess I'm with everybody else, and I would like to see hopefully some clarification as much as anything. And my last question is about the retail. What type of retail are you looking for? Would there be any beverage or food sales, or would it be strictly commercial type? I don't know how you call it, like clothes and whatever else. So I'm trying to get an understanding of what kind of shops you're looking for to go into those commercial units.
Thank you. Rob, do you have anything further to add to comments at this time?
Nothing, obviously, through process, staff will be considering these questions. I know that the applicant would like to probably respond to a lot of those.
Yeah.
But we'll also be considering those in the comments today within our staff report, which will be coming back in the not too distant future.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll go back to our applicant, and Chris or Ms. Boyd, whoever wishes to address some of the questions we provided. But before we do that, I just want to say how inspiring and how innovative this project is. I agree with all of the comments that have gone on. It really is wonderful to see something new and exciting that is going to be talked about by our neighbors as well, and is going to be an attraction to come visit our downtown area. So thank you for that, and thank you to those who have commented to date. But we have some comments and some questions to address. So the floor is yours.
Well, if I may, Your Worship, members of council and members of the public, I'm going to echo that, and I'm going to tell you a little personal story. I'm in the twilight of my career. I took this project because of this project and my clients, not because I'm in a position where I take projects like this. So it was this project itself that compelled me to get involved. So that's the little story about me and why I'm involved with the site. So if I could answer some of those questions, and I do appreciate it, I'm going to start with the parking. And I'm going to answer what I remember, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Hunt to come up and talk a little bit more about the height. Because once again, he's much more proficient at the design, and he was obviously the author of the design. So some of the more technical questions, the site's about 1/2 hectare in size, give or take. From a commercial perspective, the yellow building is intended to have more, what I'm going to say is probably downtown commercial uses. I don't think the owners at this time are sort of targeting very specific uses, and they're not the commercial owner-operators themselves. It's what the market wants to do when they come to Meaford and what your zoning bylaw will allow. There is likely going to be quote unquote commercial at the back of that yellow building, which is likely to be office space just because they don't have the what we call footfall traffic from a commercial perspective coming around the back of the building. The commercial units that are proposed in the townhouses are going to be owner operated. So if Chris buys a townhouse, I will buy it with the intention that I'm running my business downstairs. So that's to potentially tap into a market which we believe exists, but there isn't a lot of opportunity. So it's those people who want a bigger, better, more separated home occupation. It's for those people who are looking potentially for a small commercial space, and they perhaps don't have the funds or the capability of renting a larger space in downtown Meaford. And it's for those people like myself who have been working at my dining room table for 2.5 years and want to have my own office space in my home, which is separated from my very wonderful family. So those commercial spaces in the commercial are going to be perhaps eclectic and unique and a little bit different, we anticipate, than what you might find in the frontage of Collingwood Street. With respect to the green space, this is conceptual at this point, although there's been a lot of thought associated with it. As council is very aware, this project, if council sees fit with the zoning, will go through site plan approval. And at that point, you'll see detail about the landscaping. And from a parking perspective, and I do appreciate the comments about it because I didn't provide a fulsome explanation associated with it and why we're looking for the relief. So you're right. Your residential parking standard right now is 1.5 spaces per residential unit. Your parking standard is 0. And what we are doing is providing 2 parking spaces per townhouse, so more than the 1.5. We're actually providing 30 parking spaces in the surface parking area, which is a 1.5 standard for the 20 commercial units. But the notional aspect of this is twofold. One, when they go to sell those condo units, they want to sell a parking space or give or provide, whatever term comes about, of 1 parking space for that residential unit in concert with the bylaw we're asking for. And then you have 10 extra. So those 10 extra could be for the commercial users. It could be for the commercial users that come to the site. So there's 10 extra. So the condominium corporation will have an opportunity to determine what is going to happen with those extra 10 units, which will likely be a commercial approach to it, which may theoretically satisfy some of the need for commercial in this area. It'll be located on site. If we're required 1.5, I'm a planner. I hate fractional numbers, but that kicks the requirement into all 30 of those spaces will have to be for the residential units. And we'd rather have the flexibility to offer it for more than just the residential users. And if I may, unless there's something specific that I've missed, I'm going to ask Mr. Hunt to talk a little bit about the height, if I may.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Hunt.
I'd also like to say is that start off with this project as sort of burning embers of my career, which still go on for the next 30 years. But I'm finally in a position to, I would like to say that I enjoy working with these clients. And they told us when we were in school 2 things: your career didn't start till you were 50. And the other thing is it's not good architects that make good architecture, it's good clients. And so we have good clients, and their intent is to make a good project. Before we forget, I would certainly like to see images of the coal market to be able to incorporate feel into the building. We're going to be developing the elevations to have much more of the heritage and the older look. We have building code issues to deal with that we're going to have to emphasize brick because of the spatial separation of the buildings. One other thing to comment about commercial spaces is, I'm not talking out of turn here, is to say that we have the opportunity of going through with the units. It's not necessarily 10 units, so it could be five units, where you have units that can actually go straight through the building. And then also we have had discussions about the idea that there could be, hopefully, that there would be a market within the building, so that you, in a snowstorm, apparently there are snowstorms in Meaford, is that you don't have to go drive, that you can actually go down to the lower level. The other important point of talking about parking is the 10 units that are the single bedroom units are on the second floor are elevator accessed, as well as the lower level of the second floor. But certainly there's 10 units that are accessible units and barrier-free units, and units for people who might not necessarily be driving. And you now have a bus system that is in Grey County. You have a downtown, and you have an opportunity for those people who no longer can drive. And that this is an opportunity for them, and that those 10 units are very much thought about having that sort of accessibility, ease, and we talked about the connection to the park and so on. So that's what the intention is with those units. Units above, I imagine more with families and so on. They can be the 2-bedroom on the upper level, and you still have elevator access to the first floor of that. The next item I want to address is about height, and in terms of designing in section. And the height in this case is not about precedent. If you have somebody that comes to you, well, this is 5 stories. Well, yes, it's 5 stories if you look right on the paper. But time and time again, I come against the issue of dealing with average grade. Here we have on the upper level a complete story below to the lower level. So you say to that person that immediately is average of where we are reducing to a floor. So if you have somebody who comes along and says to you, well, that's 5 stories. Well, have you got a full flight, a full level between one level to the next? Does that justify you asking for 5 stories? And if you're flat and you're asking for 5 stories straight up, that's a different thing than when we have walkout. This is the case that this is walkout. You can look at the white lines that are on this plan. That indicates how much grade change there is between one level and the other level. The second intent of this is that the purple building is to have some sort of view to the water over top of the pink building and the orange building. There's a little bit of height there. And the 5th story, if we call that the 5th floor, is built up into the roof. So again, if you have somebody who comes along and says, I want 5 stories. Well, you build it up into the roof so that it makes sure that the appearance of it is just the roof that is there, that there's high roofs around in Meaford, which is equal to a story. So that again is limiting what the profile is on the town, as opposed to this being a 5-story block that we see around. Because you don't want to have the precedent of saying a 5-story block. This isn't intended to be the 5-story block, because this is to be, first of all, dealing with the grade, and then also building up into the roof that our volume is built up into that space. So those are the ideas that are behind the design. Any other questions about that?
I'm not seeing any. Thank you for that explanation. Well, thank you, everyone, for your participation this evening and for sharing your thoughts on these applications. Again, this will be referred back to our development services staff to follow up on further additional information and that is required from the applicant, but your thoughts and your comments have been helpful, of course. Once staff is satisfied that they have all the necessary information, they will provide a detailed report, and that will come back to us to assist us in making a decision. And of course, as I mentioned before, this report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and municipal policies that must be considered as part of council's decisions. It'll also explore the various public and agency comments received and note the tools which may be applied in order to address concerns that have been raised. Again, I will mention to those tuning in that if you'd like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division by email at planning@meaford.ca. And that concludes the business of this afternoon's Planning Council meeting. I want to thank everyone for your attendance and for your comments, for the excellent presentations that we've seen. And I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.